Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Coaches of the Common. My name is Jan Mayer, just a moderator, obviously, not the star of the show, but this is an ongoing series of course, organized by the Common to specialize and showcase actually our specialists and coaches that we offer here through the Common community. Today is interesting. I'm very, very interested in it. I love it. It's all about money, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm expecting all of you to actually ask your burning questions because I'm sure there's heaps of them. Today, our guest obviously is Lisa Dudson, owner and CEO, director of Acumen. And she has been in the media, and she has authored some books as well around financials and stuff. So we do have a financial expert today during this lunch. If you're eating lunch right now and watching, we're really wanting you to ask those questions. Okay, hey Lisa, welcome.
Thank you.
Cool. Now let's start off with a very important question, I think so, is managing cash flow for the business. Is it really important? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm a money person, so I think it would be fairly obvious, and my answer would be saying absolutely it's critical. I think, one of the key reasons people go into business is because they want to make money, right? So if you're not paying attention to your cash flow, then how do you actually know whether you're making any money? There has also been some research into success of businesses, and really what that's about is that there's a number of businesses that can actually fail even though they're profitable because of their cash flow. So in English, what that translates to is you might have, for instance, a couple of months where you have fantastic cash flow, but then the rest of the year is really poor cash flow. And so over the whole course of the 12 months, your money's actually making business, but you can't actually get to the second half of the year because you just don't have the income. So keeping an eye on those numbers on a regular basis dramatically increases your business's chance of success.
Okay, are there common factors why businesses have poor cash flow, for example, or it's so hard to manage them?
Yeah, I think it's seasonal. It might be seasonal specifically to your industry. Obviously in New Zealand in December and January, the lights go off on mid-December and sort of come on to the beginning of February. So that's a tough time for many businesses, and obviously we have tax payments in January as well, which is makes things a bit challenging. Also talking about tax, there's a new system now where you can pay provisional tax on a monthly basis if you're actually in an online system like MYOB or Xero, which I think is fantastic because so many businesses really don't put that money aside for the GST and for their provisional and terminal tax payments, so that can dramatically upset your cash flow. Or it might be that you've got a number of quite large customers and you lose one or two of them, and that can dramatically affect your cash flow. So there is a number of reasons.
Yep, and I can definitely, and I talk too much, I'm not even going to say, maybe I'd have an offline discussion with Lisa later, which by the way is a good thing if you come here live during our sessions. Okay, let's talk about, but do you have some solutions or advice on how to avoid those pitfalls or poor cash flow situations? I mean, other than what you've already said, having another account, or is it really more on financial forecasting?
Well, I think it's a combination. So I think the bottom line is it's paying attention. Right? So I think that the best thing you've got to do is what is your system? So let's say you're in Xero or MYOB. First of all, you've got to get it set up, and if that is all sort of Japanese to you, then hire someone in to set your system up for you and teach you the basics of how to use it. So for something like Xero, which I'm the most familiar with, you're pushing a button and you can see, what's happening in terms of your monthly cash flow, or you can see on your dashboard exactly where you are at financially. So there's quite a lot of data in today's environment because of the technology, but you just have to read it. So that's the key thing. Coming back to tax again, putting your money aside for your tax payments off to a separate account really makes a big difference, but for the most part it's just about paying attention. And it's also looking at things about top line versus bottom line. So we're often very driven to bring revenue into the business, but then the other really important thing is what's the cost associated with that, because the key thing is what's the gap between what we earn and what we spend in terms of expenses. And I've worked with a couple of businesses where they've just got printed out their bank statements and gone into Xero and gone, okay, well, let's just be really fastidious about every dollar that we spend, and they've managed to knock 10, 20, 30% off their expenses, which improves their profit, just again by paying attention. And it's things like monthly subscriptions that you sign up with and you think, oh, that'll be fantastic, but then you actually don't use them. But over the course, if they're $50 a month, you think, well, it's only $50. Well, that's $600 a year, and if you have a few of those, it all adds up. So again, it's coming back and looking at that software and going, how do I use it? And sometimes it's just the basic things you've got to learn. You don't need to learn anything overly complicated, but just a couple of key things and a couple of key reports can make the world of difference.
That's awesome. That's awesome with what I see. I'm going to apply those and look at my monthly subscriptions now, because I've been thinking about that recently. But is there a point so you look at the numbers, right? Is there a point, based on your experience, wherein you go, okay, every quarter, do we have to look at it every quarter to say, eek, okay, I might have problems, with cash flow in the next 3 months, or is it a month okay? What's the...
Well, again, it's looking at that data, right? Because I guess if you've got big customers, it's looking through into the forecasting and going, well, when is the revenue coming in?
Yeah.
That's part of it. And again, when you start paying attention to things, you start seeing patterns. So that's the thing you need to understand, right? What are the patterns around your business that you need to be aware of? And another key thing is, are you actually making money on the products and services that you're actually delivering, right? Because you can't say, okay, well, I'm selling that product for $1,000, and you think, oh, well, that's great, it's only costing me $400, but then you've forgotten that it takes 3, 4, 5 hours of time to deliver that product. Plus, you've got expenses associated with running your business that needs to be apportioned against that product sale as well, right?
Yes.
So, and that when you understand that, you go, okay, well, is this a good product that I'm selling? Is it worthwhile? Should I be focusing on another product? Should I increase the cost of that, that product or service? And sometimes I don't think people really understand the true cost of delivering their product or service in their business. So that's, that can really help in terms of profitability.
Makes sense. Okay, I'm going to pause for a bit. Do we have any questions from the audience or anything virtually? Yep.
So it sounds like everyone might have all their finances completely under control.
Yeah. What is the most common, apart from cash flow, unless that is, but is that the most common question or problem or challenge of your clients or businesses in general?
I think, the biggest challenge most people have is going, I'm not making enough. And then and then relating it to your personal income, because you've got your business income, and I guess you look at that as you are the employer, but then you want to move some money across to your personal life. So let's imagine like you as the employee, and what's the relationship between the employer and the employee? Because essentially in your business you often wear the same hat, and it's understanding the differences between the two. So it's things like people just constantly taking drawings from the business whenever they have something personal to spend, and then they really don't have much of an idea about what their business is earning and what they're spending personally. So I quite like having a set drawing amount every month, and potentially paying tax on that as you go, because once your tax is paid, it's paid. So I think that's really beneficial for people. And then kind of how much you're spending personally, and then you can go, okay, well, is my business generating enough? I generally see people in businesses that are earning half as much as they were in a job, working 3 times as many hours, and have got 10 times as much stress. So I think sometimes you've got to take a step back and say, well, is this business working for me, not only financially, but on a whole range of different levels? And then coming back to that personal versus business relationship, well, if I'm taking money out of that, or how much extra money do I take out over and above what I need personally to invest, to build my own investment portfolio, which is really where a lot of my expertise is, so I've got something for future and retirement, or do I reinvest back into the business? Because that's what a lot of business owners do, right? They keep reinvesting back into the business all the time, and then they just hope that at some point in the future they'll have enough money in their business, or they'll be able to sell it for enough money at the right time to kind of fund their future living. Whereas I'm a bit like, let's take some out along the way to grow our personal wealth as well as what's in our business. So that's another interesting, dynamic to look at, is how much do we take out to invest or spend, preferably a bit of both, and how much do we reinvest back into our business.
Is there a formula for when to know when, is it even worth reinvesting, or just keep it?
I think it's, and that's again, it's just paying attention and constantly reviewing things and going, well, how am I tracking? How's my business tracking towards its goals? How am I tracking personally towards my own financial goals? Because sometimes when we've got a business, we kind of forget the fact that we should have some personal financial goals as well, because we just think our business is going to take care of it. Yeah. And I would say that it's so much of the time that the business doesn't take care of it. And look, I had a client the other day who was looking at borrowing $50,000. They had an access to a loan opportunity for $50,000, and they were starting a business, and they said, well, I'm looking at borrowing 50 grand just to get myself set up. And I said, well, why do you need 50 grand? And they're like, well, then I can get our website and your computer and all the stuff and get all my cards and all my marketing done. And it gives me some breathing space to get, set up. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but hold on a minute. Then you've got to pay that 50 grand back plus the interest, right?
Yes.
So if you said, okay, well, I'm going to do it like New Zealand style, number 8Y mentality way, and go, well, how do I do this for nothing and set this up? And what she ended up doing was exactly that, in terms of going, okay, who can I do a contra with to do it my website? How do I get the cheapest business card possible? Do I actually need business cards in this day and age? And in the end, didn't end up borrowing the money, and just focus on getting out there and talking to people, as her marketing, in terms of spending lots of money on marketing. So again, sometimes borrowing money can send you down the garden path a wee bit if you're not careful.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to. Just reminds me. I don't have a credit card, by the way, because I don't like the interest or something for the business. Anyway, that's another story offline. But let's go back to top line versus the bottom line. You mentioned that earlier. So should a business owner look at the top or the bottom?
I think it's both, and the relationship between the two, right? Because your top line is purely about the revenue coming into your business. Yes. Your bottom line, to me, is about what is your taxable profit. So there obviously is a very close relationship between the two, but I see a lot of businesses that are driving revenue, but they're not necessarily driving profit. So you could increase the revenue in your business threefold, but not increase your profit. And I had a client a couple of years ago who had a business turning over $700,000 or $800,000 a year, half a dozen staff, and then just thought one day, look, this is all getting too hard. So I got rid of most of the staff. There was a sort of an event that happened that made this started this off. And the bottom line was, once they'd gone through that and simplified the business and said, where are we making the most profit, where are we getting the most return, simplifying things right back, and then what they found, they were working half the amount of hours they were before, and their profit doubled.
Wow.
So their turnover went from 800 down to 150, 200 grand, but it was almost all profit. They were sort of working from home, so they just ended up getting a whole bunch of staff doing a whole bunch of activity, but it wasn't actually delivering. So I think that's something you've got to be very aware of, because it's this whole thing about grow your business, but what are you achieving from that growth? Right? Because businesses that you go into business for money reasons, to be in control of your own destiny, to have some flexibility, to do the things that you love. But if you're not careful, sometimes you can grow this into this thing that just takes up a massive amount of time, doesn't actually pay you that well, and is incredibly stressful. So sometimes we can brag to our friends about, we've got this great big business with this great big turnover, but is that actually delivering to you? So, but again, this all comes back to paying attention to the numbers.
Fantastic. Okay, I think we have a few minutes left. Do we have any other questions from the audience? The audience is pretty shy today. Anyway, maybe one of my last questions would be, would you, say for example me, dare I say it, I don't like accounting. Would you advise business owners to actually have not just an accountant just to file GST and all that admin stuff, but would you recommend a financial advisor, for example, to meet every month or quarterly to just look at the numbers or guide them?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different things in there, because a large amount of accountants are compliance driven. So by that I mean doing the GST, doing annual financial summaries. So that's ticking all the compliance boxes. But then there's a smaller amount of accountants who actually look at your information and go, okay, well, are we making good profit in this business? How do we restructure things differently? Can we be more tax effective? So that's probably more of a business accountant, and I think a lot of people, particularly small businesses, go, I'll just go for the cheapest accountant I can get to get my books done, but you don't get the advice. So I suppose it's breaking it up and going, one side of it's compliance, the other side is advice, and your accountant might be a good option for you. A financial advisor, I suppose, I'm probably a little bit different from some financial advisors, and they can vary a wee bit, because you can have a financial advisor that, for instance, sells insurance and mortgages, or financial advisors who look at your own financial position and say, well, what are we doing, moving forward. So I think it comes down to separating the two out and then going, well, what kind of advice or help do I need? And I guess just a final thing that comes to my mind is around, don't be afraid of money. You know, it's one thing that I've been very passionate about is trying to get people to have more conversations about money, because there's so much judgment around it, and it's like this whole thing about keeping up with the Joneses and how important it is doing lots of money. And I think if we were more open about it and had more conversations, which is interesting thinking about the questions today, right? You know, because I think people are generally scared of it, and I think don't be frightened of it. It's not, you don't need to make it complicated. Simple always rules at the end of the day. And if you need a bit of help getting the system set up, then, you know, go and outsource that. And sometimes that just might be a couple of hours of resource that you get in to kind of create that foundation and that system, that process that you can follow, and it can make an amazing difference to your life.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for your
You're
time.
welcome.
It's very short. I still have a lot of questions in my head, and I'm sure for those who are...
There's one question.
Oh, there's one question. Okay,
So
yes?
if in case someone owns 2 or 3 businesses,
Yes.
is there is it safe to keep a rainy day fund, like a consolidated account for the 3 businesses? Like a rainy
You
day
could probably just keep that off to the side, you know, in a separate bank account, and I think it'll be tracked through your business. If you've got money coming out of those 3 businesses, it'll be tracked from those businesses into that account. So as long as it's accounted for, that's, you know, absolutely fine. And that's where your accounting systems, you know, come into play.
All right, thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Again, thank you very much, Lisa. I am hoping that she will be back, because again, I've got a lot of questions. I'm sure you do. And for those who are watching this, not live but recorded, if you have any questions, please engage with us, participate, ask those questions. I'm sure Lisa will look at the comments. And
Absolutely.
Definitely. Oh, cool. So next week we have Richard McDonald. He is actually going to talk about building a successful online product business in Asia. So he's also going to discuss about the complexities of how to do that as well. So that would be really, really interesting as a topic. Thank you again very much for joining us today, and see you next week.